So we're starting with breaking news on two fronts concerning Saudi Arabia. First, the Saudi government has announced it has released 3 women jailed for their human rights campaigning. These were activists arrested before the ban on women driving in the kingdom was lifted last June. They are still awaiting a final ruling on their case. 8 other women are also facing charges. Some of them told a hearing on Wednesday that they had been sexually harassed and flogged by guards while in prison. And then we've also got the UN investigator calling on Riyadh to publicly open the trial of 11 suspects accused of their involvement in the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The special rapporteur on extrajudicial executions, Agnes Kalimar, said the closed-door hearings are falling short of international standards. She also called on the kingdom to release the names of the defendants. Let's talk about both these issues with Marwan Bishara, our senior political analyst. Marwan, let's start with the release of these 3 female rights activists. Without wanting to turn their or downplay the importance of their case, is it almost like a good PR move by Saudi Arabia that they're engaging in here?
Well, it's more than that. Okay. I mean, thankfully, it's more than that. It does sound, for many people, a bit too little, too late, because they are released conditionally. They would still return to a third session in the courts. There are others that are still in jail. And yet, one can see that under pressure, under diplomatic pressure, under international pressure, international human rights pressure, media pressure, that countries do respond. So I think it's important to underline that under that kind of pressure, Saudi Arabia had to respond. And without that pressure, Saudi Arabia would have probably not responded, and these women and others would continue to rot in jail. So I think it's important in that sense. You know, let's remember and remind our viewers around the world, like, for example, in the case of Germany and the case of European export of arms to Saudi Arabia. All of that is frozen now because Germany said, I'm not going to approve the licensing for my parts in those jets that would go to Saudi Arabia for fighting Yemen as long as Saudi Arabia continues to violate human rights on the question of women and other questions that we'll probably address later. So I think all in all, it is more than symbolic, but it is still too little.
You can add in the issue of Jamal Khashoggi as there as well, because other nations reacted and put pressure on Saudi Arabia there. And now the UN Special Rapporteur is saying, no, this isn't good enough. The trial that you've had in Saudi Arabia, it was closed door, we need to release it. I wonder if pressure would have any impact on Saudi Arabia there, though, because we're 6 months down the track now, and they might have hoped that this had all gone away by now, actually.
Look, on the question of, for example, women trial, I've heard from reliable sources that there was actual trial going on. It wasn't a show trial. I mean, they were actually trying those women under a number of codes, and there's a defense and there is prosecutor and so on and so forth. It wasn't a show trial. In the case of Jamal Khashoggi, I mean, really? You really want to have an open trial? Will Saudi Arabia approve an open trial? Because we know who is responsible. Why we know who is responsible? Because everyone who knows Saudi Arabia, including the CIA director in the United States, including all Saudi Arabia's friends and partners, have been saying in one way or another that the Crown Prince is more or less responsible because it's the people in his office, his entourage, his security detail are the ones who have carried the operation. No one knows Saudi Arabia, does not know that this could not have been carried out without the Crown Prince's orders. Hence, an open trial, a real trial, not a show trial in Saudi Arabia, on Jamal Khashoggi, I do not see forthcoming.
One more thing I want to ask you about, and it's on a slight tangent, but we are dealing with one of Saudi Arabia's allies, the United Arab Emirates. A story here at Jazeera.com, a UAE official saying that Arab countries should be more open to Israel. What's this about?
Look, the UAE, as we've been reporting for a number of months, even in fact years, as well as Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries, as well as Arab countries, have been opening in secret to Israel. They have been opening in secret despite Israel's increased repression, despite Israel's annexation now of the Golan Heights approved by the United States, despite Israel's bombardment of Gaza, despite Israel's closures, despite Israel's punitive measures towards the Palestinian Authority, and so on and so forth. a number of Arab countries have been opening up publicly or clandestinely towards Israel. And we've been waiting for the likes of UAE and Saudi Arabia now to cough it up and, and just say it.
Acknowledge it. Make it
and
official.
now the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs in the United Arab Emirates has done exactly that. And why is he doing that now? Well, because just a few weeks ago, President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, was in the area in order to sell his deal of the century. Now we all know that this is the trap of the century rather than the deal of the century. And yet, a number of Arab leaders feel they must appease the United States, they must accept American diktats in order to save their own regimes, in order to empower their own and their likes in the region. That's why now President Sisi of Egypt is going to the United States by the mid of April in order to discuss the deal of the century. The UAE and Saudi Arabia are on board with the deal of the century. And what is that deal of the century? Well, we know it's more of the same. So-called economics of peace, no Palestinian state, no right of return, no East Jerusalem as capital of a Palestinian state that does not exist anyway, no return to the 1967 borders, no dismantle of the settlements. So basically, the deal of the century is the occupation under a new name. And the Arab countries, like the UAE, despite all of that, want to normalize relations with Israel.
Marwan, thank you for all of that. Good to cover off a number of stories with you. Thank you.